Alright, okay, so we're ready to play the new game, Ben? Let's see, make sure that that's on. Okay, we should have enough power. Alright, so Benny, you ready to play the game? So, before we get started, I just want to take a quick moment to point out that, because I know he won't eat anything, I let him do that. Obviously, this is a game to play with your dog supervised. It's not something you really want to give the dog unsupervised. Is that good? Are you gonna kill it? The other thing you want to obviously be making sure of is that the dog's not getting overly aggressive or overwhelmed by the excitement and becoming out of control or aggressive. And to kind of keep that under control, I try to make sure to take... Ah, you found the toy! Yeah, I like to hide toys in there sometimes, too. Oh, what's that? Hey. Yeah, so one of the things we do is I take treats periodically through and make sure he understands that I get to take that away from him anytime I want. Yeah, you're a good boy. He knows what this is about, so he's getting ready to earn his treat, which today will be a lamure. Yeah, what's that? But I gotta touch your box first. Give. Thank you. Sit. Ah, that's not sitting. Thank you. Stay. Good boy. Thank you. And I'll give him his box back when he's done his treat. That's just our way of letting him to know it's still safe. He'll get it back, but you don't want your lamia right now? Or is there too much to play with still? Better make sure you're not missing anything. He loves to tear up that newspaper into shreds. And basically, I use whatever's in my recycling bin at that time when I'm making it. I really went overboard with the tape on some of these to try to make it last longer for the video, though. But you can kind of, feel your way through. Some dogs, just folding the box closed is more than adequate, and if you taped it shut, it's going to be too frustrating, and they're not going to be able to get into the excitement to know that, hey, this is how we play the game. So, hey Ben, where's your toy? What's that? Hang on. Benny, get it? Good boy, yeah. Is that good? You want your box? You don't want to eat that right away? Okay. Well, you behaved and let me take your box, so that's alright. You can eat it after. The main deal is basically he understands that, things aren't getting out of hand, that he's just to let me interact and pat him and touch the box and touch the treats, and he's not going to stress out. He knows that I'm not taking things away from him for good, that he'll be able to keep playing with it after, and he'll get a nice treat, but that he shouldn't get in any way possessive, because if he gets possessive, he loses it. And he has to behave and do some obedience work before he can get it back. So yeah, as you notice, there's more than just newspaper in these boxes. There's also the toy, that little squeaky yellow thing that I bought at the Dollarama the other day. And there's that cardboard set of cups. That's another box in box. And we'll get to that in a second. He's too fixated on finding all the pieces that are easy right now and don't require him tearing apart anything else. Gotta make sure he's not missing anything. Isn't that good, Ben? Now, the one thing I'll say is that if your dog is prone towards eating non-food objects, you're better off using kibble in the, especially in things like newspaper toys, mainly because the juices or liquid of the object will soak into the paper, and in some cases make the dog think it's a food object and possibly try to eat it. So, just always seems to know exactly where there's going to be a piece. But like I said, in this case, he doesn't really care. He knows, even if it's covered in meat juice, that it's not actually a food object. So he might lick it, but he's not going to actually eat it. So I'm not too worried. But if you do have that kind of dog, stick to kibble, you'll find, and other dry foods. You'll find that you'll just end up with a less of the non-food object consumed. It's less confusing, especially at the beginning when the dog's just kind of figuring out, what is this game? What is this supposed to be about? So, as you can see right now, he knows that there's going to be more inside this box, and he also knows that any cardboard he encounters, that means that there's another layer of things to tear apart in there. So, this is basically like your Russian dolls, where in every box there's more boxes, and once he gets through the outer layers and gets all the rewards from that layer, then he goes on to the next, and to the next, and the next, and works on it until he destroys everything he can, and it's probably his greatest joy in life. One of the nice things about this particular exercise is it teaches the dog, one, to utilize their destructive desires and traits and natural instincts in a healthy, productive way, as opposed to destroying your home and all your possessions and everything else. Since I've instituted a policy of using these destructive toys where they are literally, the whole purpose is to destroy it. Is to tear it up into as many little pieces as you can, and to make a mess, and to play, and to rip things into little bits, and have some fun. Most people don't understand, we know about the chewing drive, we know about the fetch, and we know about all of these different drives, but up until very recently, we hadn't realized that dogs actually had an instinct and a drive towards actual destruction. And this stems from the instinct in a pack. When any prey item is caught, it's divided, even if it's a little tiny mouse, so that all the members of the pack can have a share. And that's what the whole point of. And normally in the dog world, I know that we're kind of used to this concept of you put a bowl of food in front of the dog, and assuming they're a normal dog, they vacuum it up, and within seconds, the food is gone. Sometimes you're lucky if it lasts 10 seconds. I know people who have gone into endless competitions and struggles and trials with their dog to try to convince them to slow down and not eat so fast because it makes them sick, and it puts them at a higher risk of developing gastric torsion or just even basic bloat, neither of which is particularly a good thing. And you'll find that in the wild or in feral dog packs or whatnot, that they'll replicate this destructive behavior. He's just torn open another one of the inside boxes to find a couple of more smaller boxes in there. Like, I'm not joking when I say the Russian doll effect. Right now we're at layer 3 or 4. Offhand, I'd have to count to know exactly which level we're at. There's probably at least half a dozen levels in this. Maybe more. But yeah, so utilizing this method, you can actually, without too much effort, sorry, I'm just pushing it all back into the center so he doesn't knock it off the bed again. Though if he does, he can bring it back up. Yeah, so anyways, typically I know that, obviously, a lot of people's animals are eating overly fast, But if you utilize a method like this, or utilizing some of the other methods I've shown you with other videos, specifically in puzzle toys and search and rescue work, scent work, varying different options, you know. You can just do simple hide and seek. You can do find the treats and hide them all over the house and let the dog search them out, etc. But if you utilize one of these methods for all of their regular meals, we're now through another layer and into the black boxes. These ones are much harder to get into, and it takes a bit more work for him to get his way through. But yeah, utilizing this method, you can easily extend mealtime from seconds into minutes, even hours. If you have done this for a while and you're pretty confident in your dog, and like myself, and I've specifically set up to have unsupervised safe toys set up and ready, that you can leave them with the dog while you go to work or whatever, school, whatever you do, and the dog will entertain themselves while you're gone by feeding themselves over an extended period. And by the time you get home, they've already worn themselves out and are just quite happy to go out, go to the bathroom, and then enjoy some quiet time with their friends. Obviously, I like to include in this game you saw at the beginning, where I was making him run around and chase it down. That mimics the hunting and prey-related eating behavior, where the pack locates and then begins to basically hound the prey animal to death until they can finally capture them, and then they do this. So, that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to mimic that to the best extent as I can. And the consequence overall has been just phenomenal. I'm really happy with the approach. I don't think I'll ever have another dog where I don't utilize this method. It's made my life so much better, and the dog's life so much better. Indeed, actually, I've found in a lot of cases now, when dealing with destructive animals, animals with anxiety issues, animals with eating issues, animals with a variety of various behavioral issues, that utilizing this and other methods to engage them more and to really utilize some of their natural drives more effectively, that this will overall result in resolving the problem behavior without actually needing to do any specific training or behavior mod, because the dog's not feeling driven to do things that they don't have another way to satisfy reasonably. So yeah, and besides, the vet bills after an animal decides to eat half your couch or your wall or whatever, they're not pleasant. It's a lot cheaper and a lot nicer and a lot more peaceful if you just kind of plan in advance that, the animal has a lot of opportunities to meet these needs and doesn't have to go searching for inappropriate options. You can always feel free when you're playing games like this to, to engage with the dog while the dog is doing this. So, you can help him wrestle the, come here. Okay? Yeah. But, depending on the dog, if the dog wants, some dogs will be like Benny here, what are you doing? What do you want? So, now he's discovered the lamb's ear again and decided that now is the right time to eat this, because we've gotten the easy treats, and now the hard ones are pretty much the ones that are left, so. Is that good? One of the nice things about big dogs, you don't have to worry too much about them choking or, something like that. Now, not every dog will be that way because, he's so relaxed and he knows that even if something's taken away, that odds are he'll get it back. And even if he doesn't get it back, he'll still get something worthwhile, and he won't be feeling left out or missed, so he's okay. I try to titrate the relative value of whatever the exchange object is for whatever I'm exchanging it for. So, in a case like this, where I'm going after a really high-value object, I might use a lamb's ear. But if I'm just, say, telling him to leave something he found on the ground outside, then a simple little piece of kibble is more than adequate. So yeah, my apologies about this guy here being a little camera shy. He doesn't really care about the camera. He just cares about kill the boxes, play the game. As you can see, he's going through one of the inner boxes. And inside each of the inner boxes, in addition to smaller boxes, you find more crunched up paper with treats and loose kibble. Basically so that when he first breaks through, after all the effort of fighting to get in, he gets an easy treat, and then he has to work harder to get all of the last treats out. He's like he's as precise as a surgeon to make sure that he gets every last little piece, but doesn't end up swallowing any paper. I've literally seen him, take a piece of, I think he actually just did that, and I screwed it up. I was going to tell you, sometimes he'll actually take a piece of paper that has a particularly hard piece in it that he's having trouble, opening, and he'll take the entire thing in his mouth, and kind of, you can see him working in his mouth and thinking about it, and a minute or two so later, he swallows and then spits out the piece of paper. He's, if I could convince him that there was a reason to do so, and that's what I wanted him to do, I'm sure he'd have no issue tying knots in the stems of cherries. But he doesn't, unfortunately have any real reason to do that, and even if he did, he has no way to know that's what I'm trying to communicate with him. That would be an interesting thing to try to convince him how to do. But, so yeah, this is the game. He's got a bunch left over. Sometimes, depending on, he just came back from playing in the park and running and going for a walk and stuff, so if you notice right now, he's not wearing his harness right now. That, to him, signals that he is in play mode and he doesn't have to work and he can just be goofy and do what he wants, sniff where he wants, He understands overall general basic rules of life and behavior, but mainly just relax and be the goofball that he wants to be. But he is such a genius. You'll find they'll surprise even you eventually, with how literally almost surgeon-like that they are with getting into these things. Once they figure out, hey, this is a method that works pretty well to open it up, each time they'll go back to the same spot, pick that careful spot of choice, and then deliberately tear in a specific way for that specific one. As you can see, he's also kind of, inherently lazy. which, I don't blame him, so any easy ones he goes for first. He only really goes after the harder ones once he's sure that doesn't have any chance of getting an easy one. So that's kind of funny. Every dog's going to have their own kind of way to get at the puzzle and figure it out. So don't worry about trying to get them to do anything in a very, very specific way. However they kind of, work to solve the puzzle, they can do. As long as they're not doing anything like dangerous or anything. I would just let them kind of figure their own way out. Avoid wherever possible helping the dog, and shortcutting the dog's, thought process on how do I figure this out. If the dog figures out, they can just kind of give it to you or not do anything and wait until you do something. They'll quickly train you, but it won't help them at all to developing their mental capacity, or entertaining them, or any of these things. So it's important to let the dog kind of figure at its own pace. If you don't intervene and you don't kind of shortcut this process, they will kind of work on it on their own until they figure it out. Benny, where you going? You want a drink? You'll also notice that I actually deliberately made sure that bowl of water was out of the way, so that there wasn't any risk when he was running around in circles and chasing down the toy, that he might accidentally trip on the bowl or something, because when they're getting that going, it could be really easy for them to hurt themselves, especially when they're young. You really have to be highly vigilant until, at the minimum, they've fully developed their skeletal structure and they've completed all of their basic growth and development. Despite the fact that he is a 3-year-old, actually he's probably over 3, he's almost 3.5 now. He is just kind of getting into puberty now. It's only been in the last, few months, actually. He was about 3 years old when he entered puberty to begin with, so he's an extremely delayed developmentally in terms of his overall development. But as much as that might sound like maybe a problem, it's not. He's a part of a program to deliberately delay the dog's natural development and growth for as long as possible, while still allowing them to fully mature and fully develop without any inherent problems. So it wouldn't be okay to just slow down the growth so that they never finish developing. The whole point is that they take as long as they fully need to develop, that we don't rush things needlessly. And that they have everything they need to be able to fully develop at whatever rate is best for them. So part of this is done by what's called calorie restriction, and it's not just as simple as, hey, don't give them enough food, or just give them barely enough food. It's very important that you don't give them excessive amounts of food, but that you more than adequately meet all nutritional needs. The goal is using very nutritionally dense foods, so that you don't need to use their full caloric allotment to meet all of their basic needs. So, the goal is not that they in any way are deficient or not getting enough of something. They should get everything and more than what they need, without becoming excessive. But at the same time, making sure that their caloric intake isn't over what their basic metabolic needs are, in addition to their activity level and health. So, say a pregnant pup or pregnant dog, hopefully not a puppy, will need more. A young pup will need more nutritionally and calorically than a fully matured adult. So those kind of things can influence your how much you're actually going to feed. But specifically that that is so much fun, eh, Ben? Sorry, I get a bit distracted. Anyway, so by making sure to meet all of their needs, but not go beyond that. So the simple rule of thumb is if they start gaining weight, you reduce the amount of food. If they start having really weird, excessive growth spurts, especially where it's not a stable or even growth rate, that likely means that they are having way too many calories. And it could mean, depending on the specific location of the growth, that there may be some nutritional deficiencies. But basically, you want to feed enough so that the dog is still growing naturally and healthily, but they're not putting excess weight on. That you can still see every part of the bone structure you're supposed to see and not see the parts that you shouldn't see. So, for example, when you just look at his rib cage, you'll notice that in general, you can't really see the ribs, but if you get just the right angle at just the right spot, you can sort of see the ribs. And if you run your fingers over the area, you can easily feel the ribs without putting any significant pressure. But there should still feel like there's a little bit of fat between the skin and the bones. So you should be able to feel the rib cage without seeing anything. And you should be able to look at their back and their spine. And, well, you might see, like, the occasional bit of a bump. Like you see right around here, there's a little bit of a bump. That's mostly due to how his fur and hair is, and how the skin grows. But you shouldn't see any, like, obvious signs that the spine is visible. And when you run your fingers over it, you should just be able to feel, by pushing a bit down, a little bit of bone, but there should be a nice, good fatty pad there. Not really heavy, so you don't want the fatty pad to be thicker than, say, enough that most of the spine is covered, but not that the vertebrae are particularly visible. And then when you go down to the hips, you should be able to just see the hip outline without it being, like, seeming to be projecting too much. You shouldn't see a big dip in between the hips. The hips shouldn't be, like, extremely visible, but they should have a nice outline, and there should be a nice tuck in between, both in the part that goes, like, basically where the genital area is when you look from the side. This area kind of there. You want that to kind of tuck up, and you want, when you look at from the top down, sorry, I'll try to give you the best shot I can. Basically, if you look right where I'm pointing, right on the flank, that's ideally, you should have another little dip in there, but you shouldn't have anything, like, extreme. So, assuming that those kind of factors are all balanced, and you look at their ankles and wrists, and it doesn't seem that any spot of the leg seems to be excessively growing unusually in diameter. So, especially this area right here. If you see that area right there, anywhere from basically the toes to about this area. If you see anything in that area that's, like, appears to be that the bones are growing wider, then you see, like, the relation between my guy's leg and the rest of the other parts of his leg. There's a little bit of enlargement, but it's relatively the same rough diameter, regardless of where you. Oops, sorry, guys. So, like, if I take my hand and wrap it around here, it's about the same diameter at the thickest point that I see there as it is when I reach up here. Same about here, when I reach behind it, when I reach over here. So it's all roughly equal. And on all four legs, when compared to each other, they were all roughly equal. When you see that they're all roughly equal, they're all growing in relative, even, equal growth, that's a sweet spot. And when you do this, it ends up causing the dog, assuming, now bear in mind that when dogs, in this program, how we're doing this, they're intact, so that it means that they have all of their hormones and organs as they would naturally occur to have, and nothing is being interfered with, and they're developing as they naturally would, and with, in terms of birth control options, we use vasectomies and tubal ligations for females and vasectomies for males for birth control measures, so we don't have any accidental, pregnancies. He's not going to become an accidental daddy by mistake, but he can still fully naturally develop without any interference with his hormones or other normal growth regulations. If you do happen, by the way, like I was saying a moment ago with the abnormal growth, if you do happen to ever, with a puppy, especially the big pups, see that that area of the bone is growing wide, unusually, that means that there is a calcium-phosphorus imbalance and excess in the diet, and the dog will become disabled and deformed if this is left and not properly remedied immediately. So you should obviously get an appointment with your vet if you see that. And you're going to have to switch to a more age and diet, nutritionally appropriate and age-appropriate diet. I don't seem to ever see issues with a raw diet. There seems to be a natural barrier in place that even when those ratios are out of balance, the dog just excretes it in its feces. That's why you see a lot of raw dogs. A lot of dogs fed raw have really white feces when the feces have been left to dry a little bit. That's the excess calcium that's normally excreted like that. However, especially when it's in a synthetic form, it can cause that deformity that I mentioned, and it can be pretty problematic. It can permanently disable, especially the bigger dogs. So it's really important to provide a nutritionally adequate diet that recognizes the age of the animal. An adult can eat as much calcium pretty much as they want, and they'll just poop it out. It's mainly dangerous when we're talking about puppies. But anytime you see that deformity, you should immediately get a vet appointment and begin assessing your food and diet that you've been feeding this animal. For example, I'll give you a little brief story about this guy. When he was a puppy, the all life stages food that I was feeding. All life stages means that it's appropriate for any size or any age dog. And so as a result of that, you don't have to worry about the specific deformity. And so I assumed I was fine until one day I looked down and I noticed that his front legs had started developing this deformity. Luckily, I caught the really early signs, and I immediately went and looked at my bag of food, and only to discover that the branded dog food that I was feeding had decided to switch their food from being all life stages to adult only, because they wanted to create their own brand of puppy food. At that point, they were only providing food that would be appropriate for any animal, and because they wanted to be able to sell more and make more of a profit, they made these foods only appropriate for adults and insisted that people with puppies should buy their puppy special food. And that meant that it had excessive amounts of synthetic calcium in it. And they didn't disclose or really notify their customer base at all. Even the stores that I was buying it from actually weren't aware of that. And he started developing the deformity, unfortunately, because I didn't know that the food I was feeding was no longer all life stages. There was in small print on the bag, if you went and looked on the back and yada yada, you would find a little thing that said it wasn't an all life stages food, but yeah, they didn't make it clear. Thankfully, though, like I said, I caught it in time. And now he's finishing his skeletal development without any issue. Because it was caught quickly and immediately remedied, he finished his normal development, and now it's not had a very significant effect on him. Though theoretically, it could have been a problem if it was left alone and untreated. But thankfully it wasn't an issue for him because I stopped feeding that food and stopped buying that brand. I'm not interested in supporting a brand that doesn't bother to tell their customer base shit like that. So, as you can see, he's working his way through all of these. They still got a long way to go. But this video is getting pretty long, so I'm going to stop it here for now. But and I'll probably show a couple of videos of him just going after the small ones, because those don't take as long, and people can get a sense of the game in a shorter video. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this, and some education on some of the better ways that you can entertain and feed your animal, and some of the things you might want to be paying attention to when you are feeding and what you're feeding the animal. But I hope you all have a wonderful day, and hopefully that you enjoy the video and it's not too boring. And I know I'm not an expert, and I know I'm not doing any editing or anything, because not an expert, not remotely an expert. I'm just filming and uploading, and I'm not even that stable. I'm trying to not shake too much or move the camera when I'm filming, but I am a poor guy who's just using his video camera on his phone to try to document some of these things that I've learned in my career with dogs, and help some people out. Anyways, I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Benny's gonna say bye for now. Hey, Ben? You wanna say bye? Here. Good boy. Have a good night. Anyways, everybody,